Okay, so we're starting today to go into really kashrut in the kitchen. What happens when we have problems in the kitchen? How do we solve problems? Next week we'll be discussing about, are you allowed to use the same oven for dairy and meat? What happens if you cook pasta in a dairy pot? Can you have it afterwards with cheese? So we're really going into the regular, maybe hardcore topics of kashrut in the kitchen. And today we're going to go over basic terms to understand basic terms of kashrut, what causes problems, when things get mixed up. So that's what we're going to go over today. As I said also last time, if there's any questions you would like to read, so please let me know. I know that some of you are doing things while we teach. That's what we do on Zoom, which is great, I think. We can do things at the same time. So I want us to read. It reminds me of a joke. There's a guy who's a guy in a yeshiva bocher who's sitting backwards, his legs on his chair. He's holding the Gemara folded, and he's smoking a cigarette. His Rosh Yeshiva comes to him and asks him, "Is this how you learn the Gemara?" And sitting like this, he says to him, "No, that's how you smoke a cigarette." Irrespective of smoking a cigarette, even then we learn the Gemara. So that's the great thing that Zoom brought to our lives. Even when we do other things, cook, clean, build the kids, even then we can learn, which is amazing. Okay, I'll open it. We have one more person joining, and okay, so as I said, we are starting today a kosher kitchen, basic terms in kosher kitchen. Let's share with you the sources, and we'll go over them until I share the sources. So if people want to go in, not this week, but next week, hopefully we'll start sending questions, like short tests on what we learned, just to make it easier for us to know, to remember, to see what, to remember what we're learning. And so basic terms. When I was a rabbi in the army, so we have a huge kitchen with used to feed between, depending where I was, 1,000 and 2,000 soldiers a day. A lot of food and things going on, moving there, sending food from one place to another place. We used to say that a problem it's not the question if the problem will happen. The question is where what problem happen. And the first thing we're going to learn about is how to prevent problems. Actually, the halacha, the Rama, and many other rabbis will first look to it. So we're going to talk today about preventing problems. Now define an ingredient, a taste ingredient, a bad taste, which has two subsections, 24 hours, and a question of lechatchila and b'diavad. We'll go to it and we'll understand it deeper. So first, preventing problems. Sometimes you can use the same dishes, the same knives, the same for milchik and dairy. For example, if I'm using a knife, one second, there's echoing here. So if you can mute yourself, and if you have a question, that will help us. Sometimes we can use the same knife for two things. We can use it for cutting cheese, wash it very, very well, and then use it for cutting cold meat. There's no halachatically problem in it. But the Rishonim and the Paskim wrote that it's better to prevent problems. And as the Rana says, but all Israel already has this custom of having two knives, one for dairy, one for meat, one for dairy bread, one for dairy or bread used with a dairy equipment, one for bread used in a meat meal, and to mark the chalavi, the dairy knife. And that's a great custom in all of Israel, and this custom shouldn't be changed. And this is maybe an idea. Before we go to check what do we do when we have a problem, how do we solve problems, so the first thing we'd say is let's prevent the problems, and then there won't be any problems. So that's maybe the first thing we have when we begin this halacha. Okay, and so as we say, we know it was a custom to use to mark the dairy equipment, and we can ask a question, just maybe interesting, why is it a custom to mark the dairy equipment? So I thought of 3 optional answers. Some of them are also written in the poskim, like Aruch HaShulchan, and other poskim bring them. A first possible option, people had less dairy dishes, so it's much easier to mark dairy dishes. If you have to make a few scratches on dishes, you'll prefer to use the dishes you have less. And for meat, you have to cook for Shabbos, and it's usually a lot of cooking. While dairy is just a bit of cheese, and there's not so much cooking in dairy, especially on the olden times. So it's much easier to mark the dairy things, the dairy dishes. So it's a very practical reason. Another reason, which is brought in Aruch HaShulchan, is that typically the way they used to mark the knives or whatever it was is by making a few slots or scratches on the dishes, on the knives. And that reminds us the words of charitzei chalav. Charitzei chalav has a double meaning. It can also mean slots of milk, but also cheese. Okay, so slots for milk, but also cheese. So this the game of words said, let's mark the dairy equipment. And the last reason, which is more today, is that today a typical way to mark knives and cutlery, knives, forks, especially in the army, is to do a hole in the end of the handle of the fork or the knife. And chor and chalav, the same letter, both of them begin with the letter chet. It's just easier to remember. In the army, always you look for letters that begin with something. So that's a typical, easier way to market those things today. So these are reasons why we mark the milchik dairy things. And as I mentioned, it's already written in the poskim. It's not something we made up today. And the general idea they're giving to us is it's easier to prevent problems than to try and solve them. So this is about this. Today already, when we have a lot of ovens and it's the poskim wrote, just have it's easier to have 2 microwaves, an oven with two ovens built inside it, which is very common in Israel. It's just easier to prevent things. There are many questions come to rabbis of what happened. I by accident did this and this, cooked meat and dairy, could be prevented. So that's a general idea. We usually know that if there's a mixture, now we're going to the next topic of taste or ingredient. When we have a mixture of something, so if I have, let's say, a kosher fruit in front of me, and in them I have something which isn't kosher that is mixed inside them, so what I'm eating isn't kosher. That's why everything we buy has to have a kosher symbol on them. Even if, let's say, I buy oatmeal, so with all the processing, so maybe there's an ingredient inside this oatmeal that isn't kosher. So we all know that a mixture of something which has a kosher thing inside it and also non-kosher, most times will be non-kosher. The question is, what is when we don't have the ingredient itself inside it, but we have the taste of the ingredient itself? Okay, if we give an example, let's say I made a cholent, and I had meat inside it, and I took out the meat. So there's no meat inside the cholent. Is this considered a meat pot? Another example could be, I'm not sure how much of you drink drinks from plastic bottles and how much of you drink sweet drinks from plastic bottles, but it's quite a known thing. If you take a plastic bottle, it's a Coke, and you pour out the soda, and then you fill it up with water, so the water will still have the taste of the Coke or the juice or whatever is in it. Plastic, for some reason, transfers the taste even after we pour out the water. So the question is, if the food has a taste in it, is it considered like as if there's an ingredient inside it or not? This question is actually a very, very important question, because most questions we have in the kitchen are usually transfer of tastes. Okay, the ingredient itself isn't there. We'll just give a common question. Let's say I used a meat frying pan, and by accident I made an omelet with butter. Okay, now the meat frying pan was empty. Okay, it was empty. There's no meat inside it. If there's something, so maybe some taste got stuck to the sides of the frying pan, and came into the omelet with butter. So there's no meat ingredient in here. It's only maybe a meat taste or flavor which is stuck to the container, a pot, or whatever it is. And this is a very common question in Kashrut. Let's go from the pasuk. A Nazir is someone who forbids himself from drinking wine, having a haircut, and a few more things. And the Torah writes what he isn't allowed to drink: yain, sheicha, okay, wine, and any other alcoholic things, and anything of grapes. And the pasuk says, "V'chol mishrat anavim lo yishte." Okay, anything which is mishrat anavim, we'll see the English in a moment, he shouldn't drink. What does the word mishrat mean? So translation here already brings the Gemara, we'll see very soon. Neither shall he drink anything in which grapes have been steeped. You know, if we have water, we put the grapes inside them, we take the actual grapes afterwards out of it, yet the flavor of the grapes, something from the grapes still transferred into the water, and the Nazir isn't allowed to drink anything from that has a taste of the grapes. Actually, the Gemara in Pesachim learns the same thing, mishrat, which is soaked, okay? It comes to teach us the principle that a taste is forbidden like the substance, or like the ingredient itself, okay? Or in the words of the Gemara, or the words that use afterwards by the poskim, so it's ta'am ke'ikar. Ta'am is a taste, ikar is substance. So the taste is considered as if the substance thing itself is here. When we drink something that has a flavor of grape juice, for many things, not for Kiddush and Havdalah, but for many things, it's as if we're drinking grape juice itself. And when we have something which tastes dairy or tastes like meat, because flavor moved from milk or from meat, so although afterwards we took out the cheese, we took out the meat, it is still has the same idea of meat or dairy, and the same thing if it got a flavor from a known non-kosher source, a non-kosher animal. And from Nazir, we learn this principle for the entire Torah. A taste is like a substance. If we taste something, it's like as if the actual ingredient is inside this mixture. That we learn from Nazir. So if we had a question, is taste like an ingredient? So the answer is yes, taste is like the ingredient, and it's a law by the Torah. It's not a rabbinical law, it's a Torah law, which means it's quite a severe law. Okay, so we learned about taste. We learned about solving, not to go into problems. Now we have a problem, and we are starting slowly, as I said, to go deep into the laws of kashrut in the kitchen. How can we nullify an ingredient? Or in the terms of the halacha, bitul. Okay, bitul ta'am, bitul berov. How can we nullify an ingredient or taste? So every time we have a mixture of an ingredient, we'll have two questions we should ask. The first question, okay, when we have a mix, so the first question is, are the foods the same kind of taste? Okay, are the food the same kind of taste? I'll give an example. If we have a kosher cow, a kosher steak that was mixed up together with a non-kosher steak from a cow. Okay, the cow wasn't shechted. Both of them are the same thing. Both of them are cows. Just one of them was shechted and one of them wasn't shechted. So both of them are the same kind. So that's an example for things which are the same kind. An example for things which aren't the same kind is meat together with fat. Okay, so these are two different things. Meat or kosher, let's say vegetables together with non-kosher oil from an animal. So these are two different things. That's the first question we ask. We'll see very soon why. The second question we ask is there a transfer of taste? Okay, or by cooking or by liquid. For example, if I mix up two kinds of oils together, even if I don't cook them, the taste gets mixed up. It's a transfer. There's something new here. It's the taste, the combination of two different kinds of taste. If I take animal fat and plant fat, oil, and then mix them up together so that the taste is transferred to each other. Okay, that's by just a mixture. And by cooking, as we give an example, let's say a piece of non-kosher meat fell into the pot, we cooked it together, and then I took out the non-kosher meat. There was a transfer of taste here to the dish. And already we said that taste by the Torah law matters a lot. So now that we ask those two questions, we can ask ourselves, how do we nullify those two things? We have two options of nullifying. One option is majority. If I have one piece and two pieces, one non-kosher piece, two kosher pieces, goes by the majority. I wouldn't say that the Torah is democratic, but there's no elections in the Torah. Obviously, no afterwards, even if there's elections, we don't go to court about it. But the Torah does go acharei rabim. Okay, we go in many things. We go according to the majority. The same by many kinds of food. If we have a non-kosher food with kosher foods, we go by the majority. That's one option. Another option will say we have to have so much kosher food inside the mixture that we will not taste at all the non-kosher food. Okay, which means if I have a few drops of a spice inside a dish, so I have to have so much food inside the dish that I will not taste the spice added to it. So here's the halacha. If the foods are the same kind and there is no transfer of taste, which means for both questions, okay, we say they are also the same kind, and there can't be any transfer of taste, we didn't cook them together, so it's enough to have one non-kosher item is nullified in two kosher items. Okay, for example, I'm not sure if you want to eat it, but if we have two kosher steaks and one non-kosher steaks, both of them are from the same kind, all three are from the same kind, theoretically we could eat all of them. I don't think that they will eat all of them, but by the halacha, we can eat all of them. It's dry, the ant can bind with each other, they're the same kind, there's no matter of taste, somehow, even if we dream about it, moving from one to each other, and it's nullified 1 to 2. That's the rare case. And now we are going into the more common case, and it happens most times, and we probably know about it, heard about it. We need shishim or 60. We need a portion of 1 to 60. Okay, so when there's a mixture of tastes, or by cooking, or by two liquid things that get mixed up with each other, it's nullified only if we can't taste the forbidden food. Okay, only if there's no chance we can taste the forbidden food. So here we can give a second to think about it. Okay, so what do we do? Okay, what's the most common thing to do? Let's say, for example, I have here a dish full of meat, and a spoon of milk fell inside this dish full of meat into my cholent. I was making coffee. By mistake, I moved my cup above the cholent pot. A bit of it spilled inside the cholent. What do I do now? So ideally, or maybe originally, what you do is you take a spoon from the coffee, from the cholent, not from the coffee, from the cholent. You go to a non-Jewish person who's a cook, and you tell him, look, you are great, you have a good taste. Tell me, what can you taste here? Can you taste here milk or no? And he'll taste it, and he'll tell you if you can taste it inside it, milk or no. So that's ideology. Every time we have a question of a mixture, we ask ourselves, do we have taste of a forbidden thing inside this mixture? And we'll just go and check it, test it out. There's a few problems in it. First, technically, not all of us have an expert in food, and we can't do this solution every time. That's the first problem. A second problem, maybe some people will lie. You have this friend of yours who will want to kosher everything you do. So he'll say everything's fine, or maybe he wants to trick you and he'll say everything is bad. So we can't always do such a thing. And not everyone knows that. Once I remember, since I cook quite a bit in the kitchen, so I can taste different ingredients. I remember a before COVID, when we were able to be hosted. So we ate at friends of ours here in Memphis, and I tasted the beef they made, and I was trying to guess what ingredients they had. And I guessed all the ingredients, honey and wine, whatever they had inside it. And they were shocked. How could you guess the ingredient? So you can see that many people just don't pay so much attention to what ingredients food have. So it's not so practical to go and ask someone. So our sages, as many times as sages do, they give a general law. Okay, they give a general law, and it's a default, and it could be that it doesn't always cover all of the cases 100%, but it's supposed to make life more simple, easier to remember. And I said we need a portion of 1 to 60, which means for every drop of a non-kosher ingredient, we need 60 drops of kosher ingredients, and this is called in the halacha batel b'shishim. Okay, batel b'shishim. When something has 60 against it, so it's kosher. Okay, so by default, we need a portion of 60, as we said. Spicy foods need more than 60, okay, just because they give a greater taste. So if for some reason I have a spice which isn't kosher, let's say it was used for idols or tomato masot, one taken from the masters, so and we can really taste it, we need more than that. More than 60. And can we trust on taste? We said that originally that's what we should do. We should trust on taste, but not always we can do it. And also some poskim say we can't trust in nowadays. People maybe don't know what they're saying, they don't know what they're talking about. So we have an argument between the Shulchan Aruch and the Rama. The Shulchan Aruch and the Sephardi Psika is if we have a non-Jewish person who's a cook and we can ask him, so we can ask him, and the Rama says we don't do it. Okay, nowadays we don't. Our custom is not to rely on a non-Jewish person, and we always need 1 to 60. Okay, we always need batel b'shishim. So it makes maybe life a bit more practical, but that's the law of today. Okay, how is here? That shouldn't be here. Okay, now what if we have a bad taste? What if we have a bad taste? We learned beforehand that according from the Torah, ta'am keikar, the taste is like the substance itself, like an ingredient itself. But what if the taste doesn't taste so well? Okay, the taste of the non-kosher item isn't such a great taste. We would prefer, taste-wise, that it won't be inside the mixture. It gives a taste, but it doesn't give a good taste. It doesn't give a good taste. So what's the halacha here in Hebrew or the language of the Gemara or the Poskim? It's called noten ta'am nifgam, something which gives a bad taste. And here is the basic halacha from the Shulchan Aruch in Yoreh De'ah, Kuf Kapet 122. I put here onions just because some people hate onions. So that's why we have here a drawing or a picture of onions. I personally like onions. But the Shulchan Aruch writes in the first chapter, noten ta'am nifgam is permitted, which means if something gives a bad taste, it is permitted. And this halacha is a very relevant halacha for industrial cookings, and for many of the questions we have in the kitchen are solved by this halacha. Noten ta'am nifgam, a bad taste, something that gives a bad taste, it is permitted, which means we aren't allowed to eat the bad ingredient itself, but if this ingredient gets mixed up with our kosher mixture, the mixture will be kosher. And it's used, as I said, a lot in the industry and also in the kitchen. What's considered a bad taste? Okay, the Shulchan Aruch here brings maybe the most common example of a bad taste. I won't read all of it. Yes, Amit.
So I don't understand the ingredient that gives bad taste. Is it kosher or not kosher?
We're talking about a non-kosher ingredient. Okay,
Okay.
non-kosher ingredient that gives a bad taste. Okay, now it's not there anymore. We'll give an example maybe. Let's say we have, today we won't eat it, but let's say we are drinking soup and we have a fly that lands into our soup. Can we take the fly out and drink the soup? Okay. So the answer is yes. Hilchatically, you can do it, because even if the fly gives a taste to the soup, it's not a good taste. We would prefer that the fly would stay out of our soup. Okay? We don't want the fly in our soup, so it gives a bad taste. Obviously, we aren't allowed to eat the fly itself, but if we're talking of taste, there's no taste that transmits or transfers from it, that we have to take it into consideration. Which means if we have a bad taste which is transferred from a non-kosher item, it will be kosher. And the example we'll see now in the Shulchan Aruch is probably the most common example we have in a kitchen. We mentioned beforehand, we didn't maybe mention it enough, that taste can be transferred by sticking to dishes or containers or pots. For example, if I cook meat inside a pot, so this pot is considered a meat pot. It has some sort of taste, a bit in our dishes, not so much in our dishes, which is a whole topic for itself. But in the olden dishes, and even today in plastic dishes, it's obvious. You can see how the metal or whatever it is transfers taste. I once asked, maybe you should do a class about it, but I once asked a guy who used to sell metals, and I asked him, is there a difference between the metals we have today and the metals they had 100 years ago? He said, yes, of course. There's a great difference between them. It's quite obvious that pots and cutlery and dishes from the olden times used to transfer taste. You cook meat inside a pot, you take out the meat, you rinse a bit the pot out, and then you even boil water. You'll still taste the taste of the meat inside the water. Even today, in some of the pots, some of the cast iron pots, it will be the same thing. The taste transfers to the next, next cooking. And there's a halacha that when the taste stays for 24 hours inside a pot, it's already considered a bad taste. Okay, so the meat itself doesn't get ruined in 24 hours, not always. But the taste which is absorbed inside the pot after 24 hours will be considered already as bad taste. How does it apply? And that's a very common example. Let's say I made omelet. Okay, I made omelet, and I didn't take care of. I didn't notice what frying pan I'm using, and I like to make omelets in with butter, so I make it dairy. And then after I finished making the omelet, I said, "Oh no, I used this frying pan, which I always use to fry schnitzels. Is my omelet kosher or not kosher?" Now the answer, according to here, will be: if I didn't use, what can be the problem? The problem can be taste from the schnitzels is absorbed in the frying pan and then transferred into the dairy omelet. But if this frying pan is hasn't been used for more than 24 hours, so there's no taste, there's no good taste inside the frying pan. The taste itself, it became bad, and we don't care about it. So it will be kosher. Many of the questions we have in the kitchen, the answer for them comes from this halacha. If the container, yes.
You said if the frying pan had not been used for 24 hours, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The frying pan has not been used for 24 hours. In very specific cases, even overnight, that's very special cases. If it happened to you, so go and ask a rabbi. In very, very rare cases, also for overnight. But otherwise, if the frying pan wasn't used for 24 hours, so you can use it. I didn't do statistics, but I think at least a third of the questions we have that I get by WhatsApp are somehow connected to this halacha.
Can I ask? So let's say you took by mistake, you took a fleishik pan that you hadn't used for a week, whatever, right? And you made your egg with butter in it.
Yeah.
Now, is that pan milchik?
That's a great question. We'll get to it in just a moment. That's a great question. Is this pan milchik?
Okay.
Meat?
Right.
Or is it treif? Okay, we'll get to it in just a moment.
Right. Right.
Okay. What about an unknown vessel? Do I have it here or no? I should have it here. I'm not sure. I didn't write it here, but what happens when we have an unknown vessel? I didn't write it here. I'll afterwards update the slideshow so you can see it if you want to. Let's say we have a frying pan that we don't know when's the last time we used it. I'm not sure. I have a few frying pans at home. I don't know if I used it in the last 24 hours or no. I went to a friend's by a mistake. I used the frying pan and I don't know when's the last time they used it. So the halacha is that an unknown, whatever it is, frying pan, cutlery, dishes, whatever it is, we assume it was not used in the last 24 hours. Okay, so the unknown frying pan, we assume it was not used and food. Now you ask a very quick question. What about the frying pan itself? To answer that, we have to just explain one thing and then we'll go together and answer this. The ten times, which means a bad, food which gives a bad taste, we are allowed to use it at the end, but not the something happened here. Let's share the screen again. Okay, so after something happened, I can see my battery is low, we'll finish in 3 minutes, hopefully. After something happened, we can use this heter, this permitted thing of something which gives a bad taste. Lechatchila, which means to mix in mind from the beginning, we aren't allowed to do it. Okay, which means if I have a fleshik frying pan, which wasn't used for 24 hours, if I already made my omelet, so the omelet is kosher. But I'm not allowed to come now and say, okay, now I'm going to make an omelet in this frying pan. Okay, so this is a very important halacha. But the eved, if it happened already, which means if it's in the past, it's fine. But for the future, I can't use this thing. Okay, so that's the difference between bedi eved and lechatchila. The translation of bedi avad means bedi avad, something which already happened. Okay, that's bedi avad. And lechatchila is to do it from now on. So again, to use this frying pan from now on, I can't. But if it already happened, the food inside is kosher. And now we can answer the question, what about this frying pan? Is it dairy, is it meat, or is it treif? And the answer will be, it's not kosher, it's treif. We have to kosher it. And why is that? This frying pan absorbed meat flavor. And although this meat flavor doesn't now make a problem to food that was cooked, we aren't allowed to use it in the future with dairy. Okay, so we can't use it in the future with dairy. And also we can't use this frying pan in the future with meat, because this frying pan was used also for dairy. So we can't use a frying pan for meat, we can't use it for dairy, and it has a mixture of foods inside it. So that's why this frying pan needs to be kashed. Okay, and again, that's because the halacha is that noten ta'am nifgam, something that gives a bad taste, is permitted only b'di'avad, if something happened in the past. But for the future, it is forbidden. So that's why this frying pan, it can't be used not for dairy, not for meat, and then we have to kasher it. Generally speaking, it's a bit hard to kasher frying pans. Some cases you can kasher them. I kashered some many times I kashered frying pans by success. But so I also have in my resume ruining a frying pan. I can teach you how to ruin frying pans. Hopefully not. But in the end of the subjects, we'll get how to kasher dishes. So anyway, this just summarizes up what we learned in very fast. We have it here in a summarizing. Preventing problems, we should have dishes for dairy and for meat, and to color them blue and red, make some scratch in it, a hole, so we know what's what, and prevent things from getting mixed up. Taste and ingredient, we said that taste that is mixed inside the food is considered as if the ingredient itself is mixed inside it. To nullify a forbidden ingredient, so in most cases we need a portion of 1 to 60, and when something transmits a bad taste, so it is kosher. The most common example is a container, a dish, a pot which wasn't used for 24 hours. That's the most common halacha example. And we said that this is permitted only b'di'avad for the past, but for the future, we can't use something which, even if it wasn't used for 24 hours. That's for today. If there's any questions, so great. If no, so we'll meet on Tuesday or Wednesday. I'll send an email, hopefully, at the beginning of next week.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
This was great.
Thank you very much. Okay, have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank